There is something about nighttime that makes everything feel heavier. You already know this. Maybe that is why you are here right now, lying in the dark. The world finally quiet around you, and yet your mind still moving, still turning things over, still carrying whatever today left behind. The worries do not announce themselves politely. They just arrive, one after another, settling in like uninvited guests who have decided to stay. Before we begin tonight's story, I want to ask you something simple. Tell me in the comments, where are you right now? What city are you in? And what time is it where you are? I always wonder about the person on the other side of the screen. Whether you are in a small apartment in a busy city, or a quiet room somewhere far from anyone who knows your name, I am glad you are here tonight. Now, put the phone down gently, or let it rest where it is. Adjust your pillow. Let your shoulders drop. You do not need to go anywhere or do anything for the next little while. Just breathe slowly and let the story come to you. Tonight, we are going to travel back to a land of dust and olive trees, of flatbread baked on hot stones and oil lamps burning low in clay houses. We are going to sit with 3 people who were each, in their own way, stuck inside a night that would not end. And we are going to watch what happened when Jesus walked into their darkness. Not with a speech, not with a solution, but with something quieter and more lasting than either of those things. It is late afternoon in Capernaum, and the light is going golden. Capernaum is a fishing town on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. A working town, not a grand one. The streets smell of fish and wood smoke. The houses are built close together from dark basalt stone. Cool inside, even on the warmest days. Fishing nets hang drying in the courtyards. Children run between the doorways. Dogs sleep in patches of shade. Simon Peter's house sits near the water. It is not large, but it is full. The kind of house that always seems to have someone in it. Something cooking. Someone just arriving or just leaving. Simon is a fisherman, broad-shouldered and loud. The kind of man who takes up space in a good way. And on this particular afternoon, he is worried. His mother-in-law is sick. She has been lying on her mat since morning, her body burning with fever. In those days, fever was not something you managed with medicine from a shelf. Fever was something you endured and prayed over, and sometimes did not survive. The women of the house have been sitting with her, keeping a damp cloth on her forehead, speaking softly. But the fever has not broken. Jesus arrives at the house that afternoon, just back from the synagogue where something extraordinary had already happened. A man with an unclean spirit had cried out, and Jesus had spoken, and the man had been set free. The whole town is buzzing. People are following, watching, wondering. But inside Simon's house, there is no buzzing. There is just a sick woman and a family quietly afraid. Someone tells Jesus what is happening. There is no dramatic announcement, no request for a public miracle. It is more like the way you might tell a trusted friend, quietly, almost in passing. She is not well. She has been sick since morning. What happens next is one of the gentlest moments in all of the Gospels. Jesus goes to her. He stands beside her mat, and he reaches down and takes her hand. That is all. He does not shout, does not pray a long prayer, does not ask the crowd to gather round. He simply takes her hand, and the way you might take the hand of someone you love who is frightened, as if to say, I am here. I see you. You are not alone in this. And the fever leaves. She gets up. And because she is that kind of woman, the kind who shows love through doing, she begins to serve them. She brings water. She warms food. She moves through her house like someone who has been given back to herself. There is something in this small miracle that is easy to miss if you are looking for the dramatic version. Jesus did not make a speech about healing. He did not explain the theology of what he was about to do. He just went to where she was, and he took her hand. This is the first thing to carry with you tonight, as you close your eyes, that the love which heals is often not loud. It does not always announce itself. Sometimes it just comes close and reaches out and holds on. Now we move forward a few years, and we find ourselves on a crowded road. The road is packed with people, pressing, jostling, everyone trying to get close to Jesus as he walks. The air is warm and dusty. There is noise everywhere, voices calling out, sandals on dry earth, children weaving between adult legs. Jesus is moving with purpose. He has been asked to go to a synagogue leader's house, an urgent errand, and the crowd is following him like a wave. Somewhere in that crowd, trying to stay invisible, is a woman. She has been sick for 12 years. 12 years. Let that settle for a moment. That is not a season of difficulty. That is not a hard chapter. That is 12 years of waking up every morning inside a body that will not cooperate. 12 years of doctors who could not help. 12 years of spending everything she had on treatments that left her worse off than before. According to the customs of her time, her condition also made her ceremonially unclean, which meant that for 12 years, she had lived on the edges of her community. No touching, no gathering, no belonging. She is not bitter. Exactly. But she is exhausted in the way that only very long suffering can make a person exhausted. Down in the bones, deep in the spirit. She has heard about Jesus. She has thought about going to him, about pushing through the crowd, about asking. But something stops her. Maybe she is afraid of being turned away. Maybe she has been disappointed so many times that hope itself has started to feel dangerous. Maybe she simply does not believe she deserves to be seen. So she makes a smaller plan. She thinks, if I can just touch the edge of his robe, just the hem, just the fringe of it, as he passes. I will not ask for anything. I will not make a scene. I will not bother him. Just the edge. Just enough. She works her way through the crowd, head down, moving carefully. People press against her from all sides. She is close now. She reaches out her hand. Her fingers brush the hem of his robe. And in that instant, the bleeding stops. She knows it immediately. Not just as an absence of pain, but as a fullness, a warmth, a return of something she had almost forgotten she ever had. 12 years, and then this. One moment of reaching, and then the quiet miracle of wholeness. But Jesus stops walking. He turns around in the crowd and says, "Who touched me?" His disciples are a little baffled. "Lord, there are people pressing against you from every side. Everyone is touching you." But Jesus says no. I felt something go out from me. Someone reached out in faith. The woman knows he is talking about her. She is trembling. She is terrified. She has broken rules. She has touched a rabbi while ceremonially unclean. She could be scolded, shamed, sent away. She comes forward and falls at his feet, and she tells him the whole truth. All 12 years of it. All the trying and failing. All the reaching and hoping, and the one moment of desperate quiet faith. He listens to all of it. And then he says, "Daughter." He calls her daughter, which is not a medical term and not a legal ruling. It is just tenderness. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Go in peace. Not go and be more careful. Not go and follow the proper procedures. Not even go and don't tell anyone. Just go in peace. She had tried to be invisible, to take the smallest possible piece of grace and slip away unnoticed. And instead he stopped everything, turned around, and called her by a name that placed her inside a family. He made sure she was seen, not because it served the crowd, not for the spectacle, but because she deserved to know that what had happened to her was real, and that she mattered. You may be carrying something tonight that you have carried for a long time, something you have stopped expecting to change, something you have made a kind of uneasy peace with. The way you make peace with furniture you cannot move. I am not going to tell you what the outcome will be. But I want you to notice something in this story. She reached out in the smallest possible way, almost afraid to hope, and she was not turned away. Let that stay with you as your breathing slows. The last story tonight takes us to Jericho, an ancient city on the edge of the desert, one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on earth. The road into Jericho is well traveled. Traders, pilgrims, soldiers, all kinds of people pass through. And on the side of that road, every day, sits a man named Bartimaeus. He is blind. He has been blind his whole life, or for so long it amounts to the same thing. He cannot work. He cannot travel independently. He cannot read. His world is made of sounds and smells, of heat and dust, of the voices of strangers passing close and moving on. He sits by the road and calls out for whatever people will give him. And every evening he goes home with whatever that was. He has heard about Jesus. In a world without newspapers or broadcasts, news travels through sound, through people talking as they pass, through merchants comparing stories, through the way a rumor moves from one roadside to another. And what Bartimaeus has heard is this: there is a man from Galilee who heals people, who gives sight to the blind. He has been sitting with that piece of information for some time, turning it over, not quite knowing what to do with it. And then one afternoon, the sound changes. There is a crowd coming, a big one. Not just a few people, but a wave of movement and noise and energy coming down the road. He reaches out to the person nearest to him and asks, "What is happening?" And they tell him it is Jesus of Nazareth passing by. Bartimaeus does not deliberate. He does not make a careful plan. He does not think about what people will think of him, or whether this is appropriate, or whether he should wait for a better moment. He just opens his throat and shouts, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd is not pleased. People around him tell him to be quiet, hushing him, shushing him, the way a crowd hushes someone who is disrupting the mood. You are embarrassing yourself. This is not the time. Be quiet. But Bartimaeus shouts louder, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stops. He stops in the middle of the road, in the middle of the crowd, on his way to Jerusalem, where enormous things are already in motion. He stops and he says, "Call him to me." And the people who had been shushing Bartimaeus moments ago now turn to him and say, "Take heart. Get up. He is calling for you." Bartimaeus throws off his outer cloak, which is not a small thing in a world without pockets. That cloak is where he stores what little he has. And he gets up and comes to Jesus. Jesus asks him a question that might seem strange at first. He says, "What do you want me to do for you?" It seems obvious, doesn't it? The man is blind. But Jesus asks, because there is something important in being asked. Because being seen is not just about the outcome. It is about the moment of being asked, of having someone look at you and say, "You matter enough for me to stop and hear what you need." Bartimaeus says, "Rabbi, let me recover my sight." And Jesus says, "Go. Your faith has made you well." And immediately, Bartimaeus can see. The first thing he sees is the road, the dust, the feet of the crowd around him, the sky, which is very large, and perhaps the face of the man standing in front of him, who had stopped a whole crowd just to hear what a blind beggar needed. He does not go home. He does not slip away quietly. He follows Jesus down the road. 3 people. 3 different kinds of darkness. A woman burning with fever in her own home, too sick to ask for help. A woman so worn down by 12 years of suffering that she was afraid to ask for more than the fringe of a robe. A man sitting by the road who had lost count of how many people had walked past without stopping. And in each case, the same thing happened. Not a performance. Not a spectacle. Just someone coming close. Or someone stopping. Or someone turning around in a crowd. Just attention. Just the simple, radical act of being seen by someone who was not too busy to stop. You are going to close your eyes in a little while, and the night is going to do what nights do. It is going to get quieter, and your body is going to get heavier. And whatever you are carrying today is going to start, slowly, to soften its grip. And as you drift, I want you to hold just this one thought. The God of these stories is not a God who looks away. He stops in crowds. He takes the hand of the sick and the forgotten. He hears the voice that everyone else tells to be quiet. Whatever your night is holding tonight, let it be held. You can rest now. There is a particular kind of worry that settles in around this hour of the night. It is not the sharp, urgent kind, the kind that makes your heart race and your thoughts scatter. It is quieter than that. It is the low, steady hum of not quite enough. Not enough time. Not enough money. Not enough energy left at the end of the day to be the person you want to be. The feeling that you are always just slightly behind. Always stretching to cover what needs to be covered. Always wondering if it will work out. Most people carry this. Very few people talk about it. Tonight's stories are for that particular kind of tired. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you right now? What city are you in? And what time is it where you are? I always love knowing who is on the other side of the screen. Listening in the dark. Now, let yourself settle. If you are still holding any tension in your jaw, let it go. Let your hands open, palms soft against the blanket. You are not going anywhere. You do not need to solve anything tonight. Just let the story carry you for a while. We are going back to Galilee, to a hillside above a quiet lake, and to a small wedding in a village where the wine ran out too soon. 2 moments. 2 different kinds of not enough. And in both of them, something quietly extraordinary happened. It is late in the day, and the crowd has been there for hours. They came in the morning, some of them walking since before sunrise, from villages and towns scattered across the region. They came because they had heard about Jesus, because someone in their family had been healed, or because they were desperate and had run out of other places to go, or simply because something in them needed to be close to whatever it was he carried. The place where Jesus has gone to be alone is a hillside above the Sea of Galilee. In the springtime, this land is green and gentle. Low grass on the slopes, wildflowers in the crevices of rock, the lake glittering far below, wide and silver in the afternoon light. From up here, you can see the whole sweep of the shoreline, the small fishing boats that look like seeds on the water, the far hills of the Golan fading into haze. It is a beautiful place to rest, but the crowds have followed. And when Jesus sees them coming up the hillside, not a small group, but thousands of people, whole families, old men and children, and young mothers carrying babies. Something moves in him. The Gospels use a specific word for what he feels. Not obligation, not duty, compassion. A deep, physical compassion, the kind that comes from somewhere below thought. He spends the whole day with them, teaching, healing, listening. Hours pass. The sun moves across the sky. The shadows on the hillside grow long. And then his disciples come to him with a practical problem. It is getting late, they say. This place is remote. The people need to eat, and there is nowhere nearby to buy food. We should send them away to find dinner in the villages. It is a reasonable suggestion. It is exactly what you would say in that situation. You have done the good thing. You have given what you have to give. And now the practical reality asserts itself. People need food. And food needs to come from somewhere. And that somewhere is not here. But Jesus says, you give them something to eat. The disciples look at each other. There are thousands of people on this hillside. Do you want us to go and spend 8 months' wages on bread? Even then, it would barely be enough. Jesus asks, what do you have? They go and look. They come back with the answer. 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish. A boy in the crowd has offered them his own lunch, pressed forward into the hands of the disciples. A small and slightly bewildering act of generosity from someone who perhaps did not fully understand the math of the situation. 5 loaves, 2 fish, thousands of people. Jesus takes the food. He looks up to heaven, gives thanks, and begins to break the bread. And the disciples begin to distribute it. And they keep distributing. And the bread does not run out. The fish does not run out. Everyone eats. Everyone has enough. The Gospels say they were all satisfied. Not rationed. Not given a small, polite portion. But satisfied. In the way that a good meal at the end of a long day satisfies you completely. When it is over, the disciples collect what is left. 12 baskets of fragments. More left over than they started with. I want to stay with this for a moment, because it is easy to rush past the miracle to the meaning and miss something that is quietly important. The miracle did not begin with abundance. It began with 5 loaves and 2 fish, which is to say, it began with not enough, with a small, slightly embarrassing amount, the kind you almost do not want to mention because it seems so inadequate to the size of the problem. And what Jesus did was not conjure a feast from nothing. He took what was offered, however small, however insufficient it seemed, gave thanks for it, and worked with that. There is something here that is not a formula, not a promise that your specific not enough will be multiplied in this specific way. But there is a posture, a way of holding what you have, however small it is, and giving thanks for it before you know whether it will be enough. A way of trusting that the one who asks you to offer what you have is not unaware of how little it seems. The hillside grows dark. The families begin the long walk home, full and quiet and unhurried. The children are sleepy, draped over shoulders. The old men walk slowly, digesting both the meal and the day. The lake below has gone from silver to deep blue to the dark mirror of early night. Somewhere on that hillside, a boy walks home without his lunch, but something tells me he was not hungry. Now, we travel to a different kind of gathering entirely. Cana is a small village in Galilee. Modest, dusty, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and a wedding is the event of the season. A wedding in first-century Jewish culture was not a single evening celebration. It was a multi-day feast, sometimes 3 days, sometimes 7, where the whole community gathered, ate, drank, danced, and celebrated the beginning of a new household with everything they had. It was also, therefore, a matter of considerable honor. To run out of food or drink at a wedding was not simply an inconvenience. It was a social catastrophe, the kind of thing people would talk about for years. It reflected on the family, on their standing in the community, on their ability to provide for their guests. In a culture built around hospitality and honor, it was a failure that would not quickly be forgotten. And somewhere in the middle of this wedding, perhaps on the 2nd or 3rd day, when the celebration is in full swing and the dancing has been going for hours, the wine runs out. Mary, the mother of Jesus, and is there. She hears about it, and she goes to her son. She does not make a speech. She does not frame it as a request or a theological proposition. She simply tells him what she knows to be true. They have no wine. Jesus' response is curious and has been puzzled over for centuries. He says, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." It sounds, on the surface, like a refusal, like a gentle redirection. But Mary does not treat it as a refusal. She turns to the servants standing nearby and says, "Simply do whatever he tells you." She does not argue. She does not plead. She states the problem, receives what sounds like a no, and then, without visible doubt, without visible anxiety, she simply tells the people nearby to be ready to follow his instructions. There is something deeply restful about that posture. She brought what she knew to someone she trusted, and then she let it go. She did not manage the outcome. She did not hover anxiously. She did not keep checking to see if anything was happening. She said, "Do whatever he tells you." And then, apparently, she went back to the wedding. Jesus looks at 6 large stone jars standing nearby, the kind used for ceremonial washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. He tells the servants, "Fill them with water." They fill them to the brim. 6 jars, completely full. This is not a small amount of water. This is somewhere between 120 and 180 gallons. And every drop of it, a moment ago, was plain water drawn from a well. Then he says, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They do. The master of the banquet tastes it, not knowing where it came from. And he calls the bridegroom over and says, in what must have been a bewildering compliment, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best wine until now." The best wine. Not adequate wine. Not wine that would do in a pinch. The best. And this is the first miracle Jesus performs. Not a healing. Not a dramatic rescue. Not a confrontation with spiritual darkness. A wedding. A social crisis. A worried family and an embarrassing shortage, and a party that needed not to end badly. He takes 150 gallons of water and turns it into the finest wine anyone at the party has tasted. And the wedding goes on. I have been thinking about what these 2 stories have in common. And it is this, in both of them. The need was completely real, not imagined, not exaggerated, actually real. The crowd was actually hungry. The wine had actually run out. No amount of positive thinking or perspective shifting was going to change the basic facts of the situation. And in both cases, the miracle did not come by pretending the need was not there. It came by bringing the need honestly. A boy with his small lunch. A mother with a quiet sentence. And then something happened that should not have been possible. I am not going to tell you tonight that all your needs will be met in the way you are hoping for, or that the specific shortage you are carrying will be resolved by morning. I do not know that. And I would not say it if I did not know it. Because you deserve honesty more than you need comfort built on sand. But here is what I do want to leave with you. As you lie in the dark and your breathing gets slower and the night gets softer around you, the God in these stories is not absent from the ordinary. He is not only present at the dramatic moments, at the edge of cliffs, and in the middle of storms. He is at weddings. He is on hillsides where families are hungry after a long day of walking. He is in the moment, when the practical thing runs out and someone has to say, quietly, "We have a problem." And he is not bothered by the smallness of what you bring to him. 5 loaves, 2 fish. One sentence from a mother who trusted him enough to walk away after saying it. Whatever you are carrying into sleep tonight, the financial worry that woke you up at 3 in the morning last week, the stretch that never quite seems to reach, the question of whether there will be enough, you do not have to have it resolved before you rest. The hillside held thousands of people until everyone was full. The wine was saved, and the wedding went on, and the celebration was not lost. Let your hands open. Let the weight of not enough rest somewhere other than your chest tonight. The night is quiet. The stars are out. Somewhere across a dark sea, there is a hillside covered in soft grass, and the smell of bread, and the sound of people who have been fed going home slowly in the dark, unhurried, satisfied. That is where you are going now. Close your eyes and go there. There are nights when the stillness outside does not match the storm inside. The room is quiet. The house is quiet. Everyone else seems to be asleep, or at least at rest. And yet something in you is still moving, still churning, still bracing, still waiting for the next thing to go wrong. You cannot always name it. Sometimes it is not even a specific fear. It is just a low, persistent unsettledness. The feeling of being a small boat on a large, dark sea. If that is where you are tonight, then this chapter was written for you. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? What city? What time? What kind of night is it where you are? Node. I always want to know who is out there in the dark with me. Now let your body do what it already knows how to do. Let your legs go heavy. Let your shoulders sink a little further into whatever is beneath you. You are not responsible for the weather tonight. Not the weather outside, and not the weather inside either. Just breathe and let the story come. Tonight we are going back to the Sea of Galilee. That same wide, blue lake we have visited before. But tonight we are going out onto the water itself. We are going to sit in a small wooden boat in the middle of a storm. And we are going to watch what happens when the wind meets someone who is not afraid of it. It is evening on the Sea of Galilee, and the day has been long. Jesus has been teaching since morning, speaking to large crowds on the shore, telling stories, answering questions, explaining things that are not easy to explain. By the time the sun begins its descent toward the western hills, he is tired in the way that deep engagement makes a person tired. Not empty, but spent, ready for quiet. He tells his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." They are fishermen. Most of them. Simon Peter, Andrew, James, John. They know this lake. They have spent their lives on it. They know its moods, its currents, the way the wind comes down through the surrounding hills and can change the surface from glass to chaos in a matter of minutes. They push off from shore, settle into the rhythm of rowing, and the lights of Capernaum begin to shrink behind them. Jesus goes to the back of the boat. He lies down. He puts his head on a cushion. The Gospels mention this detail, which I have always found quietly wonderful. This small domestic detail of a cushion in the stern of a fishing boat. And he falls asleep. The lake at night is beautiful when it is calm. The stars over Galilee are extraordinary. No competing light, no haze, just the full weight of the sky bearing down on the dark water, doubled in reflection. The disciples row. The boat moves. The night is soft. And then the wind comes. It happens the way it always happens on this lake. Quickly, without much warning. The surrounding hills act like a funnel, channeling wind down toward the surface. And what was a calm evening crossing becomes something else entirely. The waves build. They begin to break over the sides of the boat. The disciples, experienced sailors, are working hard, adjusting, bailing, pulling at oars. But the storm keeps building, and Jesus is still asleep. This is the detail that catches me every time I read this story. Not that the storm came, not even that Jesus was on the boat, but that he slept through it. That while 12 men were straining and afraid and the water was coming over the sides, the Son of God was lying in the stern with his head on a cushion, completely, entirely asleep. There is a kind of peace in that image that goes beyond explanation. It is not the peace of someone who does not know there is a storm. It is the peace of someone who knows exactly where they are and is not threatened by it. The disciples wake him. They are not gentle about it. The Greek suggests something closer to shaking him awake. "Teacher," they say, "don't you care that we are perishing? Don't you care?" That is the real cry underneath the question, isn't it? Not just "we are scared," not just "please help us," but "don't you care? Are you aware of what is happening to us? Does it matter to you?" Jesus wakes up. He looks at the wind. He looks at the waves. And he speaks to them, not to the disciples, but to the storm itself. He says, "Peace, be still." And the wind stops. Not gradually, not over the course of the next hour as weather systems shift. Immediately, the wind drops and the surface of the lake goes flat. And the sudden silence after all that chaos is so complete that it is almost startling in its own way. Jesus turns to his disciples. He asks them, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They are not reassured by this question. They are, if anything, more undone than before, because now the fear has shifted. A storm they understood. This they do not understand. They say to each other, quietly, "Who is this man, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" It is a question that hangs in the air over the still water, under the Galilean stars, with no easy answer. It is a few months later, and the disciples are in a boat again. This time, Jesus has sent them ahead of him, across the lake, to the other shore, while he stays behind to dismiss the crowds and then go up into the hills alone to pray. He has been doing this more and more, carving out space in the hills, alone, in the dark, communing with his Father in the long, quiet hours that other people spend sleeping. The disciples are making slow progress. The wind is against them tonight. They are not in danger the way they were in the storm. This is not that kind of night. But it is hard work, rowing into a headwind, and they have been at it for hours. It is somewhere between 3 and 6 in the morning. The stars are beginning to fade at the edges of the sky. The other shore seems no closer than it did when they started. And then one of them sees something. A shape, moving on the water. Not a boat, not a swimmer. Something upright, walking, coming toward them across the surface of the lake, as though the water were a road. They are terrified. In the dark, in the middle of the lake, in the small hours of the morning. They think it is a ghost. They cry out, and then the shape speaks. It says, "Take heart. It is I. Do not be afraid." The voice is familiar. It is the voice they know. It is Jesus, walking on the water, coming toward them through the dark. Peter, because of course it is Peter, impulsive and large-hearted, and always the first to leap, calls back. He says, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." Peter climbs over the side of the boat. He puts his feet on the surface of the lake, and he walks. He actually walks on the water toward Jesus. In the dark, in the middle of the Sea of Galilee at 4 in the morning. For a moment, it works. And then he notices the wind. He takes his eyes off Jesus and looks at the waves around him. And he feels the wind. And his mind does the calculation that minds always do. This is impossible. This cannot be happening. I am going to sink. And he begins to sink. He cries out, "Lord, save me." Immediately. That word again. Immediately. Jesus reaches out his hand and catches him. He pulls him up. And he says, gently but directly, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" They climb back into the boat together. The wind stops. And the disciples, for the second time on this lake, find themselves sitting in an impossible calm, wondering what kind of person can do these things. I have been sitting with these two stories for a long time, and I want to tell you what I think they are really about. because I do not think they are primarily about weather. In the first story, the disciples are terrified by an actual storm, and Jesus is asleep in the boat. He is present. He is right there, in the same small wooden vessel, feeling the same rain on his face. He is not far away, not inattentive, not elsewhere. He is just not afraid of what is frightening them. In the second story, Peter does something genuinely extraordinary. He steps out onto the water, and for a moment he does it. He walks. The miracle is already happening. And then he shifts his attention from the person in front of him to the circumstances around him. And the circumstances win. I think most of us live somewhere between these two stories most of the time. Either we are in the boat, exhausted and afraid, looking at the storm and wondering if anyone on board cares that we are struggling, or we are Peter, doing something that seemed possible a moment ago. And then the wind picks up and we look down and we begin to sink. And in both cases, the response is the same. The hand reaches out. The voice says, "Peace. Be still." Or, "Why are you afraid?" Or simply, "Come." The lake does not stop being the lake. The wind does not stop being real. But something else is also real. Something that the storm does not cancel out. A presence in the boat, a hand extended over the water, a voice that the wind obeys. You are in your own small boat tonight. Maybe the water is rough. Maybe it is just dark. Maybe you are tired from rowing against the wind for longer than you expected. You do not have to make it to the other shore tonight. That is not your job right now. Your job right now is to let the oars rest, to lie back, and to notice that you are not alone on the water. The stars are out over the Sea of Galilee. The surface of the lake, right now, is perfectly still. Somewhere in the distance, the far shore is a dark line against a darker sky, and it is there, solid, real, waiting, even though you cannot quite see it yet. The wind has stopped. The water is holding you. Let yourself be held. There is a particular kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. You can be in a room full of people and feel it. You can be surrounded by family, by colleagues, by the everyday noise of a life that looks full from the outside, and still carry this quiet, persistent sense of being somehow beside things rather than inside them. Of being present, but not quite seen. Of mattering to the general situation, without quite mattering to anyone in particular. Most people have felt this at some point. Some people feel it most of the time. Tonight's stories are for those people. And if you are one of them, if some part of you recognized itself in that description, then I want you to know, before we even begin, that you are not imagining it, and you are not broken, and you are not alone in feeling it. Before we go further, tell me in the comments, where are you tonight? What city? What time? I always mean it when I ask. I want to know who is out there listening. Now, let your body settle. Let the blanket feel heavy and warm. Let your breath come slowly, without forcing it. Tonight, we are going to visit 3 people who lived at the edges of their world. Pushed there by illness, by circumstance. By the way, communities sometimes quietly agree to stop seeing certain people. And we are going to watch what happened when someone refused to look away. The road between Samaria and Galilee was not a road that most people chose if they had other options. It ran through borderland, the kind of in-between territory that belongs fully to neither side, claimed by neither, tended by neither. The villages here were small and scattered, connected by dust paths between rocky hills covered in scrubby brush and the occasional twisted olive tree. In the heat of midday, this land could feel like the edge of the world. And at the edge of one village on this road, there is a group of men who have made the edge their home. There are 10 of them. They have leprosy, which in the ancient world was not always what we now call Hansen's disease, but was a category that covered various severe skin conditions. All of them disfiguring, all of them frightening to onlookers, and all of them under the law of Moses, requiring the person who had them to live apart from the community. Apart from the community. These 4 words are worth sitting with for a moment, because they describe something more than a physical location. They describe an entire way of existing. These men cannot go home. They cannot sit at a table with their families. They cannot walk through the market, or attend the synagogue, or participate in any of the rhythms of ordinary life. They live together in this in-between place. Not quite in the village, not quite in the wilderness. And they survive on whatever people choose to leave for them. They have to announce themselves when anyone comes near. The law requires it. They must call out, unclean, unclean, a warning, a declaration, a daily reminder of what they have been told they are. On this particular day, Jesus is passing through on his way to Jerusalem. They see him coming from a distance. They know who he is. Word travels, even to the edges. And they do what Bartimaeus did on the road to Jericho. They lift their voices and they call out, loudly, across the distance between them, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. Jesus stops. He looks at them, all 10 of them, standing there at the edge of the road, keeping the required distance, their faces turned toward him with whatever mixture of hope and exhaustion, and trying not to hope that they have been living with for however long they have been out here. He does not go to them. He does not touch them, the way he touched the leper in another story, the way he reached for the hand of Peter's mother-in-law. Instead, he says something that must have seemed, at first, almost anticlimactic. He says, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." That is it. No dramatic gesture. No spoken word of healing. Just, "Go show yourselves to the priests," which was the required procedure for someone whose leprosy had been cured. The official process for being declared clean and readmitted to the community. Go as if it has already happened. And they go. And as they are walking, not after they arrive, not after the priests examine them, but while they are still on the road, still walking toward what they have been told to trust, the leprosy leaves them. All 10 of them, healed in motion, healed in the act of choosing to believe before there was any visible evidence to believe in. And here is where the story takes a turn that has always moved me. One of them, when he realizes what has happened, turns around. He does not keep going toward the priests. He comes back, running, the text suggests, or at least moving quickly. And he throws himself at the feet of Jesus and thanks him. He is praising God at the top of his voice. The Gospels say he cannot contain it. And this man is a Samaritan. Not Jewish. Not one of the people who would have considered themselves the primary audience of Jesus' ministry. An outsider. Even among outsiders, Jesus notices who has come back and who has not. He says, gently, "Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give glory to God except this foreigner?" He is not angry. The question is not accusation. It is more like wonder. The quiet, slightly sad wonder of someone who notices when gratitude is absent. Not because he needs it, but because he knows what ingratitude costs the person who carries it. To the Samaritan he says, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." All 10 were healed, but only one came back. And only one heard those words spoken directly to him, face to face, close enough to feel them. There is something in this for all of us who have received something good and moved on without stopping to mark it. And there is something else here too. The Samaritan, the double outsider, the one who had the least reason to expect to be included, was the one who came closest. The edge of the village is not the edge of God's attention. Jerusalem in the time of Jesus is a city of sharp contrasts. There is the Temple Mount, vast, magnificent. The great stones of Herod's construction catching the morning light and holding it like gold. There are the wide colonnaded walkways where teachers pace and debate, where pilgrims come from distant countries, where the air smells of incense and roasting offerings and the dust of 10,000 sandals. And then there is the Pool of Bethesda. It lies just north of the temple, near the sheep gate. A large pool, actually 2 pools, connected, surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. In these colonnades, in the shade and the smell of still water, there is a gathering of the city's most broken people. The blind, the lame, the paralyzed. They come here and they wait, because there is a belief that at certain times, an angel stirs the water, and the first person to enter after the stirring will be healed. It is a place of desperate hope. and desperate hope, held for long enough without resolution, begins to look a great deal like despair. Among the people lying in these colonnades is a man who has been there for 38 years. 38 years. He has been ill for longer than many people in this story have been alive. He has watched the seasons change from this same spot. The winter rains, the spring wildflowers, the summer heat, the autumn cooling, year after year after year. He has watched other people get healed, or give up and leave, or die. He is still here. Jesus comes to the pool on a Sabbath day. He moves through the colonnades, through the crowd of the suffering, and he finds this man. The text says Jesus knew he had been there for a long time, as if this detail matters. As if the duration of someone's waiting is not a reason to overlook them, but a reason to go directly to them. He asks the man, "Do you want to be healed?" It is the same kind of question he asked Bartimaeus. Simple, direct, slightly unexpected. The man's answer is revealing. He does not say yes. He says, "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." 38 years. And the answer to "Do you want to be healed?" is a description of all the reasons it has not happened yet. All the obstacles, all the times someone else got there first, all the trying that came to nothing. He has been waiting so long that he has perhaps forgotten what it felt like to want something cleanly, without the weight of all the previous disappointments attached. Jesus does not address the explanation. He does not fix the system, does not promise to help him into the water next time. He simply says, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." And the man gets up. After 38 years, he gets up. He picks up the mat he has been lying on all this time, and he walks. What I find most tender about this miracle is what Jesus does afterward. He finds the man again. Later, in the temple. He could have let the miracle speak for itself. He could have moved on. Instead, he seeks him out and says, "See, you are well. Sin no more, so that nothing worse may happen to you." He came back to check on him, to speak to him again. Personally, in the temple, on the same day, as if the healing were only the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it. 38 years of waiting. And the answer came not through the stirring of the water, but through someone walking directly up to him and speaking to him by name. It is the Sabbath, and Jesus is teaching in a synagogue. The synagogue is a long, cool room, stone floors, and whitewashed walls, benches along the sides where the community gathers to hear the Torah read and expounded. Light comes through narrow windows high on the walls, falling in pale bars across the floor. It smells of old stone and lamp oil, and the particular dusty quietness of a place that is set apart for a certain kind of quiet. Among the people in the synagogue today is a woman. She has been bent over for 18 years. A spirit of infirmity. The Gospel of Luke calls it matter. Something that has curved her spine so severely that she cannot straighten up, cannot lift her head fully, cannot stand upright and look at the world at eye level the way everyone around her can. For 18 years, she has seen the world from below. Feet and floors and the hems of robes, the underside of tables, the ground rather than the sky. She has not asked for anything. She is simply there, and in the synagogue on the Sabbath, which means she has continued to come, to participate in the life of her community, to show up even in this condition. There is a quiet faithfulness in that detail that is easy to miss. Jesus sees her. He calls her over, and he says, "Woman, you are freed from your disability." He lays his hands on her, and immediately, that word again, she straightens up. For the first time in 18 years, she stands fully upright. She looks forward rather than down. She sees faces rather than feet. She lifts her head and she praises God. Right there in the synagogue, on the Sabbath, in front of everyone. The ruler of the synagogue is indignant. There are 6 days for work. He says to the crowd, "Come on those days to be healed, not on the Sabbath." Jesus answers him with a kind of calm firmness. He says, "You hypocrite. Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day?" A daughter of Abraham. That is what he calls her. Not a disruption, not a problem, not a test case in a theological debate. A daughter of Abraham, someone with a lineage, a belonging, a name that places her inside the story of God's people. Someone who has always been included, even when the circumstances of her body made her feel invisible. 18 years bent. And he saw her across a crowded room, called her over, and gave her back her posture. 3 people tonight. 3 different kinds of being forgotten. 10 men living at the literal edge of the village, required by law to announce their own unworthiness whenever anyone came close. A man who had been lying by a healing pool for so long that his answer to, "Do you want to be healed?" had become a list of obstacles. A woman who had spent 18 years looking at the ground, and in each case, a seeing, a stopping, a direct address. Not a general blessing sent in their direction. Not a policy that covered their category. A specific, individual attention. These 10, this man, this woman, that treated each of them not as a problem to be managed, but as a person to be encountered. I think about the people in our own lives who have been waiting a long time, who have explained their situation so many times that the explanation has become a kind of wall, who have been showing up faithfully for years, bent under something invisible, hoping that someone will notice. And I think about the moments when someone did notice, when a specific person stopped and said, "I see you. I know how long you have been here. Get up." Those moments do not always look miraculous from the outside, but to the person receiving them, they can feel like standing up straight for the first time in 18 years. You are lying down now, in the dark, and the night is getting quieter around you. If you have been waiting for something for a long time, healing, recognition, belonging, the simple feeling of being truly seen by someone who matters. I cannot promise you the timeline. I cannot give you the day or the hour. But I can tell you what these stories keep insisting. In their quiet and persistent way, the ones at the edge of the village are not outside the reach of the one who is looking. The ones who have been lying by the water longest are not overlooked. The ones who have been bent for 18 years are daughters and sons of Abraham. And their name is known. Your name is known. Let that be the last thing you hold before the night takes you. The room is quiet. The stars are out. And somewhere, in the gentlest possible way, you are being seen. Rest now. There are losses that do not announce themselves loudly. Some grief comes in quietly, the way a tide comes in, not crashing, not dramatic, just steadily rising until one day you look around and realize that the water is everywhere and the familiar shoreline has disappeared, and you are not sure exactly when it happened. It might be the loss of a person. It might be the loss of a version of yourself, or a relationship, or a season of life that you did not know you were in the last days of until it was already gone. Whatever it is for you, tonight's chapter is for that. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you right now? What city? What time? I always want to know who is sitting with these stories in the dark. Now, let yourself go soft. Let your face relax. The small muscles around your eyes. The hinge of your jaw. Let your arms rest. You have been carrying things all day, and you do not need to carry them for the next little while. Just breathe and let the story find you. Tonight, we are going to sit with 3 of the most tender moments in the Gospels. 3 times when someone who was gone came back. Not in a dramatic, triumphant way. In the quiet, almost disbelieving way that real restoration tends to happen. The way morning comes after a very long night. Slowly. And then all at once. And then you are standing in the light wondering how you forgot what it felt like. The city of Nain sits on a gentle slope in Lower Galilee, south of Nazareth. in a region of soft hills and grain fields, and the particular golden light that this part of the world holds in the late afternoon. It is not a large city, but more of a town, really, surrounded by a low wall with a gate where the road comes in from the north. On this particular afternoon, two crowds are moving toward each other at that gate. One crowd is coming in from the north, Jesus and his disciples, and a large group of followers walking the road from Capernaum, dusty from travel, alive with the energy of people who have been witnessing extraordinary things and are still trying to make sense of them. The other crowd is coming out through the gate, a funeral procession, moving slowly, as funeral processions do, with the particular heaviness that grief gives to every step. At the center of the procession is a young man on a bier, carried by others. He is dead. And behind the bier, walking in that stunned, slightly mechanical way that acute grief sometimes produces, is his mother. She is a widow. The Gospel of Luke is careful to tell us this. She has already lost her husband, and now she has lost her son, which means she has lost, in the ancient world, almost everything. Without a husband or a son, a woman in first-century Jewish society had no economic security, no formal protection, no clear place in the social structure. She is not only grieving, she is facing an entirely unmoored future. She is surrounded by people from the town. A large crowd, Luke says, which tells us she is known here. That people have come out in numbers to walk this road with her. And yet in the middle of all those people, she is profoundly alone with what she is carrying. Jesus sees her. The Gospel says that when he saw her, he had compassion on her. And then it says something that is easy to read past but worth stopping at. He said to her, "Do not weep. Do not weep," said to a mother at her son's funeral. It could sound dismissive. It could sound like the kind of thing people say when they do not know what to say. Don't cry. It will be okay. The hollow comfort of someone who has not sat long enough with another person's grief to know that sometimes the only honest response is to weep with them. But Jesus says it differently. He says it the way you say something when you already know the end of the sentence. When you are about to give someone a reason not to weep that is actually sufficient. He walks to the bier. He touches it. Another moment of boundary crossing. Because touching a bier made a person ceremonially unclean. And the men carrying it stop. And Jesus says, "Young man, I say to you, arise." The young man sits up. He begins to speak. And Jesus gives him to his mother. That last phrase, Jesus gave him to his mother, is only 5 words in English. And I've read it dozens of times, and it still does something to me every time. The specificity of it. Not he restored him to life, not the miracle was completed, but He gave him to his mother. As if that were the point. As if the whole miracle were oriented toward that one reunion, that one set of arms opening, that one moment of a mother receiving back what she thought she had lost forever. The crowd, understandably, does not know what to do with what they have just seen. They are filled with fear, Luke says, but also with praise, because something in them recognizes that they are standing at the border of something they do not have language for. They say, "A great prophet has risen among us. God has visited his people. God has visited his people." On an ordinary afternoon, at the gate of a small town, in the middle of a funeral procession that nobody expected to end the way it did. Jairus is a synagogue ruler, a man of standing, of responsibility, of visible faith. He is the kind of person who sits at the front of the room, who people look to, who has spent his life being composed and capable and in charge of things. And he comes to Jesus and falls at his feet. He falls at his feet, which is not the posture of a man in charge of things. It is the posture of a man who has run out of other options, who has set aside everything he knows about dignity and decorum, because the thing that is happening is simply too large for dignity to contain. His daughter is dying. She is 12 years old. She is his only daughter. And she is dying. "Please come," he says. "Please lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." Jesus goes with him. And then, as we talked about in the first chapter, the crowd presses in, and the woman with the issue of blood reaches out and touches the hem of his robe. And Jesus stops and asks who touched him. And time passes, and the conversation happens, and the disciples are bewildered. And by the time all of this resolves, someone comes from Jairus' house with news. "Your daughter is dead," they say. "Do not trouble the teacher any further. Do not trouble him any further." As if the situation has now moved beyond the territory where hope is appropriate. As if death is the place where you stop asking. Jesus hears this, and he turns to Jairus and says, "Do not fear. Only believe. Only believe." In the moment when the worst possible news has just arrived, when the rational response is to accept that it is over, only believe. They continue to the house. There is already a commotion outside. Mourners, people weeping and wailing, the sounds of a household that is crossed into grief. Jesus goes inside and says, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." They laugh at him. Luke records this detail without commentary. They laughed at him, knowing she was dead. And Jesus puts them all outside. He takes only the child's mother and father and 3 of his disciples, and they go in to where the girl is lying. He takes her hand. He says, in Aramaic, the actual words preserved in the gospel, the everyday language he spoke, Talitha cumi, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl gets up and begins to walk. Her parents are overcome, beside themselves. The text says, which is a phrase that tries to describe a feeling that probably has no precise description. The feeling of watching your daughter, who was dead, get up and walk across the room. Jesus tells them to give her something to eat. This detail always makes me smile a little. The first instruction after the miracle is practical and domestic and completely human. She has just come back from death, and she is probably hungry. Give her something to eat. Make sure she is fed. Take care of her. The God of resurrection is also the God who thinks about whether a 12-year-old has had lunch. The last story tonight is the longest, and the one I want to spend the most time with. Because of all the resurrection miracles in the Gospels, this is the one that shows us the most of what Jesus actually felt. And it is not what you might expect. Lazarus lives in Bethany, a small village on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, just a short walk from Jerusalem. He lives there with his two sisters, Mary and Martha, a household that Jesus clearly loves, that he returns to often, that functions as a kind of home away from home for him during his visits to the Jerusalem area. When Lazarus falls ill, his sisters send word to Jesus immediately. They say simply, Lord, he whom you love is ill. And Jesus, when he receives this message, does not come immediately. He stays where he is for 2 more days. This is one of the harder moments in the Gospels to sit with. The person is sick. The family has called, and Jesus waits. He tells his disciples that this illness is not unto death, that it is for the glory of God. And then he waits. By the time he arrives in Bethany, Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. Martha comes out to meet him on the road, composed, direct, the practical one. She says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Even now, in the middle of grief, in the middle of loss, in the middle of 4 days of waiting, even now, Jesus tells her that her brother will rise again. Martha answers carefully. Theologically, yes, I know he will rise in the resurrection at the last day. She is giving the correct doctrinal answer, the one she has been taught. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. Not, I will bring about the resurrection. Not the resurrection is a future event. I am the resurrection. Present tense. Standing in front of her, on a dusty road outside Bethany, while her brother lies in a cave with a stone rolled in front of it. Then Mary comes, the other sister, the one who had sat at Jesus' feet and listened, the one who was always more interior, more feeling. She comes, and she falls at his feet. And she says the same thing Martha said. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But where Martha said it as a statement of faith, even now, Mary says it in grief. Simply, honestly, without the theological scaffolding. She is weeping. The people with her are weeping. And the text says that Jesus, when he saw her weeping, was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And then it says something that is the shortest verse in the Bible, and possibly the most important 2 words in the whole story. Jesus wept. He who just told Martha that he is the resurrection and the life. He who knows exactly what he is about to do, who has waited 2 days specifically to arrive at this moment, stands at the grave of his friend and weeps with the people who are weeping. Not because he does not know the ending. He knows the ending. But because the grief is real, because the love is real, because 4 days of absence and a stone in front of a cave is genuinely, legitimately painful, and he does not exempt himself from feeling it. Some of the bystanders say, "See how he loved him." Others say, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying?" It is a fair question, and Jesus does not answer it with words. He goes to the tomb. He asks them to take away the stone. Martha, ever practical, says, "Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days." And Jesus says, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" They take away the stone. Jesus looks up and prays. A brief, quiet prayer. More like a conversation than a petition, thanking his Father for hearing him. And then he calls out, "Come," in a loud voice, into the darkness of the cave. "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus comes out, still wrapped in the burial cloths, his face still bound, moving toward the light from the inside of the tomb. And Jesus says to the people standing there, still quietly, still practically, "Unbind him and let him go. Unbind him. Let him go. Take the grave clothes off this man and let him walk freely." 3 people came back tonight. A young man at a city gate, given back to his mother. A little girl who was only sleeping, fed something to eat when she woke. A man in a cave, called by name into the light, unwrapped and let go. And in each story, underneath the miracle, there is something quieter happening. A mother receiving her son. A father watching his daughter walk across the room. 2 sisters standing at a tomb that is suddenly, impossibly empty. The returning is not only about the person who came back. It is about the person who receives them. The arms that open. The tears that shift, mid-moment, from grief to something that does not have a clean name. Relief, disbelief, Joy so sudden it feels almost like pain. I think there are things in all of our lives that feel like they are in the tomb. Relationships that went dark. Versions of ourselves we thought we had lost. Hope that we buried quietly, without ceremony, because it hurt too much to keep hoping. I am not here to tell you that everything comes back. The honest truth is that not everything does. And the people in these stories are not blueprints. They are glimpses. Moments where the curtain was pulled back just far enough to show what is possible, what is real beneath the surface of things. But I want to leave you with one image as you drift toward sleep. The shortest verse. Jesus wept. He knows the ending. He holds resurrection in his hands like a word he is about to speak. And still, at the entrance to the tomb, he stands with the people who are grieving, and he weeps with them. Whatever you have lost, whatever is in the cave, whatever has gone quiet, you are not grieving it alone tonight. Someone is standing at the entrance with you. Someone who knows the ending and still weeps at the door. Because the love is real and the grief is real, and both of those things can be true at the same time. Let your eyes close now. The night is soft, and the stars are very old, and the morning is already somewhere beginning. You do not have to watch for it. It will find you. Rest. There is something about the hour just before dawn that is unlike any other hour. The night is at its deepest, and yet something in the air has already begun to shift, almost imperceptibly, almost too subtle to name. The darkness has not lifted. The stars are still out, and yet something knows that the night is ending. The birds know it first, then the air itself, which takes on a quality that is different from midnight, different from 2 a.m, different from any other hour. It is the quality of something about to change. This is the hour we are in tonight. Not the sunrise, not yet, but the hour just before it, when the world is still dark and still quiet, and the change is coming whether or not you are awake to see it. Tonight is our last chapter together, and I want to spend it on a shoreline. But first, tell me one more time, in the comments, where are you tonight? What city? What time? And if you have been here for all 6 chapters, tell me that too. I want to know who made it to the last morning with me. Now, if you are still awake, let yourself soften a little more. If you have been drifting in and out, that is perfectly fine. Let yourself drift. The story will find you wherever you are. Let your body be completely heavy, completely still. You have nowhere to go. There is nothing left to do tonight, except let the last story carry you the rest of the way home. To understand the miracle of this last morning, you have to understand what the days before it felt like. The disciples had watched Jesus die, not from a safe distance, not in abstraction. They had lived through the arrest, the trial, the terrible procession through the streets of Jerusalem, the hours on the hill outside the city walls. Some of them had stood at the foot of the cross. Some had watched from further away, unable to come closer. Some had not watched at all, because watching was too much. And then he was gone. 3 years of following, of learning, of watching the impossible happen in front of their eyes. The storms that stopped, the bread that multiplied, the dead who walked out of tombs. And now the person at the center of all of it was in a tomb of his own. Sealed. Finished. The days that followed were the kind of days that do not move properly. Time becomes strange after a sudden loss. The ordinary things, eating, sleeping, speaking, all feel slightly unreal, slightly beside the point. The disciples gathered together, mostly out of instinct, because there was nowhere else to go and no one else who would understand. And then, on the third morning, the tomb was empty. The resurrection appearances in the Gospels are quieter than you might expect. There is no thunderclap, no army of angels descending on Jerusalem, no public announcement that would have been impossible to ignore. The risen Jesus appears first to a woman weeping in a garden, who mistakes him for the gardener until he says her name. He appears to 2 disciples walking a dusty road to a village called Emmaus, and walks with them for hours. And they do not recognize him until he breaks bread at their table. And then he is gone. He appears in locked rooms, behind closed doors, among frightened people who cannot quite believe what they are seeing even as they see it. The resurrection does not arrive like an earthquake. It arrives like a quiet voice saying, "Your name." Like bread broken at a table, like a figure on a shoreline at dawn. It is early morning on the Sea of Galilee. After everything, after Jerusalem, after the cross, after the empty tomb and the appearances in the locked rooms, some of the disciples have come back here, back to the lake, back to the place where it all began for them, back to what they knew before Jesus called them away from their nets. Peter had said, simply, "I am going fishing." And the others had said, "We will come with you." It is not a crisis of faith. Exactly. It is more like the gravitational pull of the familiar, when everything else has been upended. When the world has turned inside out, and you do not know what to do next, you go back to what your hands know. You go back to the water. They fish through the night. They catch nothing. The lake is dark and quiet and completely uncooperative. The nets come up empty. Again and again. The stars wheel slowly overhead. The hours pass, the way hours pass on a fruitless night. Long and unhurried and slightly hollow. By the time the sky begins to lighten in the east, they are tired and empty-handed, and the water around them is still and gray. And then, in the dim light of early morning, they see a figure on the shore. He is standing at the edge of the water, perhaps 100 yards away. Close enough to call to, far enough that his face is not yet clear in the half-light. He calls out to them, "Children, "Do you have any fish?" They call back, "No." He says, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." It is the kind of instruction that, under other circumstances, might seem almost irritating. They are experienced fishermen. They have been fishing all night, and a figure on the shore is telling them to try the other side of the boat. But they do it, and the net fills immediately, so full that they cannot haul it back into the boat. The fish are there, suddenly, abundantly, on the right side of the boat in water that was empty a moment ago. And John, looking at the shore, looking at the figure standing at the edge of the water, recognizes something. He turns to Peter and says, quietly, "It is the Lord." Peter does not wait for the boat to reach the shore. He wraps his outer garment around him. He had taken it off to work, and he jumps into the water and starts swimming. The other disciples follow in the boat, dragging the heavy net behind them. And when they get to the shore, they find something that is, in its own way, the most remarkable detail in the entire resurrection story. A charcoal fire, fish cooking on it, bread beside it. Jesus standing there at the edge of the Sea of Galilee in the early morning light, with a fire going and breakfast ready, waiting for them to come in from the water. "Bring some of the fish you just caught," he says. "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples asked him who he was. The Gospel of John records this detail almost in passing. None of them dared ask him who he are, knowing it was the Lord, which suggests that there was still something about his appearance that was different, something that made the question feel simultaneously necessary and unnecessary. They knew and they did not quite know. They recognized and were also still slightly undone by the recognition. But they came. They sat down at the fire, and Jesus served them, taking the bread and giving it to them, taking the fish and giving it to them. One by one, in the gray gold light of a Galilean morning, these men who had watched him die sat on the shore of the lake where they had first met him, and he gave them breakfast. I want to stay here for a moment, because I think this is one of the most important miracles in the entire New Testament, and it is the one that gets the least attention, because it does not look like a miracle. Nobody is healed. Nobody is raised from the dead. The math of fish and bread is not spectacular. It is just breakfast. It is just a fire and some food and a group of tired, confused, grieving, bewildered people sitting down to eat. But here is what makes it miraculous. 3 days earlier, these men had watched the person they loved most die. They had run away, or wept from a distance, or locked themselves in rooms. Peter, specifically, had denied knowing Jesus 3 times, standing by a charcoal fire in the courtyard of the high priest. In the cold of that terrible night, saying over and over, "I do not know him." I do not know him. I do not know him. And now there is another charcoal fire, and the person he denied is standing beside it, handing him bread, saying, "Come and eat." No accusation, no reckoning, no list of what went wrong and who failed, and what it will take to make it right. Just come. Eat. You have been fishing all night, and you are hungry, and I have made breakfast, and there is enough for everyone. The restoration of Peter happens a little later in this same chapter. Jesus asks him 3 times, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" Once for each denial, gently unwinding the knot that had formed in Peter's chest over those 3 terrible nights. But even before that conversation, before the formal restoration, before anything is said about what happened or what comes next, there is this breakfast on the shore, at dawn, together. This is what resurrection looks like from the inside. Not a trumpet blast, not a victory parade, a fire on a beach, and fish cooking, and the smell of bread, and someone you thought you had lost forever saying, "Come and have breakfast." I have been thinking, as we have traveled through these 14 miracles together, about what they all have in common. Not the specifics. The storms and the bread and the healings and the resurrections are all different. But underneath all of them, there is something that stays the same. Someone is overlooked, or suffering, or afraid, or lost, or empty-handed, or grieving, or guilty, or bent, or waiting by a pool, or sitting by a road, or out on the water in the dark, or standing at the edge of a tomb, and someone comes, stops, turns around, reaches out a hand, speaks a name, breaks bread, makes breakfast. The miracle, in every case, is not primarily about the outcome. As extraordinary as the outcomes are, it is about the attention, the specific, unhurried, completely individual attention of someone who is not too busy to stop, not too important to notice, not too focused on the destination to see who is by the side of the road. It is the attention that says, "You are not invisible. You are not forgotten. You are not too broken or too far gone or too long waiting or too guilty or too small. You are seen. You are known. Come and have breakfast." The Sea of Galilee is very still at this hour. The sky in the east has just begun to hold a faint light. Not sunrise yet. Not even close. But the first suggestion that sunrise is somewhere in the future, that the dark is not permanent, that the direction of things is toward morning, even when morning cannot yet be seen. The fire on the shore is small and steady. It has been burning for a while. The coals are orange and the fish are done and the bread is warm, and the smell of it drifts out across the water in the early morning air. You have traveled far tonight. through a healing in a stone house in Capernaum, through a hillside where bread multiplied, across a dark sea in a storm that stopped, through the colonnades of a pool where people waited for years, to the gates of a city where a funeral procession turned around, to a cave outside Bethany where a dead man walked toward the light. And now you are here, on the shore, at the end of the night and the beginning of something else. Whatever you brought into tonight, the worry that hums at the back of your mind, the grief that has been sitting quietly in your chest, the loneliness that has no clean explanation, the guilt that you have carried longer than you want to admit, the hope that you buried because hoping again felt too dangerous. You do not have to carry it any further tonight. The fire is going. The morning is coming. You are not alone on the shore. Your eyes are heavy now. Let them close. Your breathing has slowed. Let it slow further. The water is lapping gently at the edge of the shore. That soft, rhythmic sound that is older than any of us, that has been keeping time on the shore of this lake since before anyone stood here and watched the sun come up. In and out, slowly, steadily. The stars are fading one by one at the edge of the sky. Not because they are going out, but because the light is coming. Quietly, gradually, the way all good things come, from somewhere just beyond the horizon. You do not have to watch for it. You do not have to stay awake until it arrives. Let the sound of the water carry you. Let the warmth of the fire reach you across the dark. Let the smell of bread and the gray light of early morning and the soft sound of voices around a fire be the last things you notice before the night takes you completely. The morning will find you. It always does. Sleep now. Sleep well.